What's going on, Ambitious Vet? Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Vet Show. I'm your host, Chris Hoffman. I'm a Marine Corps veteran and became an award-winning entrepreneur after I realized that immediate transition education expires. When you're one of those ambitious, goal-oriented veterans that want to figure out what your potential is post-military, really just using your military experience as a stepping stone to what's next in your life. That's why the show exists. It's designed to dive into the trenches with today's top subject matter experts, share inspiring transition stories, provide master classes, really just to equip you with the realistic perspective on what it takes to win in the trenches of everyday life post-military. Ambitious Vet, if you haven't already, I think we had a saying in the military where it says, "Ears open, sir." I request you open your ears and lean into this episode, because I promise you, if you're tuned into this at the very end, you're going to have gained at least one golden grenade to blow your freaking mind. Let's go. Are you ready to dive into the trenches with other growth-minded veterans just like you who want to consume content, attend a live online events such as masterclasses, roundtables, fireside chats, and also have lifetime accountability around you reaching your post-military goals? If that's you, please visit ambitiousvetnetwork.com and go ahead and apply for joining our exclusive community learning platform. There, you're getting access to an exclusive network of ambitious vets just like yourself looking to grow and improve every day in the trenches of life. You're going to get courses and monthly live online events and a social network aspect to the platform itself, so you can continue to grow and develop key relationships to improve in areas of life that you know you need to be improving on. So I want you to go check out ambitiousvetnetwork.com. Would love to see your application come through, and would love even more to see you inside the platform, engaging and consuming content that's going to help you dominate your 2023 goals.
It's time to get into the trenches, dig into your purpose, and fire up your life's fulfillment. The Ambitious Vet Podcast starts now.
Hey, what's going on, Ambitious Vet? We are right back inside the trenches this week with Dan Manning. Dan started speaking and storytelling as a fighter pilot, then as a speechwriter. But when he started teaching adults how to improve collaboration, he became obsessed with learning to tell stories that work. Now, he helps startup founders, especially those with ADHD, cut through their own noise and build stories that connect with investors, customers, and employees. Imagine being able to communicate that effectively, Ambitious Vet. He's also a Techstars mentor. And also, I met this man at the latest military influencer conference in Las Vegas. And I just got to tell you, this man's powerful. And we actually did a bromance during a breakout session. And, he helped me get so concise with our company story, my personal story, and how that correlates. And in a way that doesn't downplay it, because I say it all the time. I don't realize that there may be a new person in front of me, a new investor, a new potential customer, a new partner. So Ambitious Vet, when you're listening to the rest of this conversation, I want you to listen from that place. How do I become a better storyteller for my employer, my manager, someone I need to influence in front of me, maybe an investor, a customer, a partner that you just haven't been able to crack the code yet? Listen from that place. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dan Manning. Dan, are you there?
Awesome. Great. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, of course, man. It was a privilege meeting you at the Military Infantry Conference and just spending 5 minutes with you, just 5 minutes with you. I was getting so much more clear on just storytelling and learning how to better communicate, right? And how much I just have a lot of filler words, man, and not a lot of impactful stuff. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but I want you to kind of fill the gaps inside the introduction. Let the Ambitious Vet that's listening to this know a little bit more about who you are.
Sure. No, it was a fantastic introduction. So on the veteran side, I spent a career in the Air Force, 25 years. The first half of that time as a fighter pilot flying the A-10. The second half as a military diplomat. So I've done crazy things in crazy places. But as I left the Air Force, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and how I wanted to take my experiences there, but not to fly for the airlines and not to go back for a defense contractor job, but to do something different. So I started my own business. I started teaching these very core human skills of critical thinking, creative thinking, and collaboration. But then the fourth C is always communication. You have to be able to communicate your ideas to someone else. There's no problems that are left anymore that we can just solve on our own. We have to work with other people. So communicating was the thing that I really got very focused on. In particular, I found that I was more effective communicating when I communicated through story. So I really started diving deep into what it means to create a story and how to be a great storyteller and to figure out more about the science of storytelling so that I could then fit the things that I was saying into that model and just communicate better and persuade more and sell more if selling's the thing I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And you're doing a great job of that, by the way. And
Thank
it
you.
was just cool to kind of see you kind of coach people from afar at the conference too, around helping them get concise and doing that as well. So I'd love to just kind of unpackage like the history of storytelling, right? I know it's becoming like the new flashbang and it's a new buzzword, storytelling, right? And there's so many mediums to do it through, like video, blogging, stuff like that. But you're coming down to the core of actually how to tell your story, right? So what's the history of storytelling from your point of view?
Yeah. So when I think about storytelling, it goes back probably 100,000 years, right? The first humans were storytellers. The way that humans pass knowledge, experience, the way that we're able to accumulate knowledge over time is through stories, right? We were telling stories 100,000 years ago. We didn't even start writing them down until about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And we didn't start using PowerPoint until about 40 years ago.
Really?
So when I'm trying to communicate, I'm driving way back to the very beginning. And because humans have been telling stories for so long, our brains are adapted for story. Or it might actually be the other way around, that our brains are adapted in a way that makes storytelling something that's more better, a better medium for us to communicate with one another. But if you think way back, sitting around the campfire, somebody tells a story about how they were able to kill the buffalo on the hunt, or how they avoided being eaten by the tiger that jumped out of the jungle there. Everyone else is going to listen, not just because it's something that's interesting that they're talking about, but because that person is conveying knowledge and their experiences that I can add to mine, right? Humans are the only species where I can take your experience, I can hear your story, and I can add it into my experience. And now I can do something different with the rest of my life. I've got 2 dogs, and I know that my 2 dogs are not sharing stories and telling about how they can get one over on us, right? Each one of them have to have that experience themselves, but humans are different. And if you go back even 30,000 years to the first Homo sapiens that were around, they're not very different than us, right? They're about the same size. They have the same brain capacity. The only reason that we're having a podcast and we're talking over computers is because we're able to pass information from person to person. It's a core human skill, and being good at it just makes everything easier.
Yeah. It's funny. You said Homo sapien, right? My drill instructor used to call me a disgusting Homo sapien in boot camp, but right before he put me on the quarterdeck. So I love that word. I have it. It just brought back memories.
That's funny.
About storytelling. But no, thanks for really breaking that down. It's crazy how the history has evolved over that. And I picture also like the taverns back in the day, Louisiana Purchase, talking about storytelling and purchasing that land and just moving throughout the Wild West and all the storytelling that happened throughout history that we just don't even know of and never even seen that's the effective communication mechanism that allowed all the history to get us to where we are today. I mean, that's incredible perspective on it for sure. I'd love to kind of shift gears now to also just what do stories convey? I know you just hit it on it a little bit, right? But I would love to kind of hear components of what do stories convey to customers, to potential partners, to investors.
So I say stories can do one of 4 things, or maybe some combination of these 4 things. And the first is that stories can be entertaining, right? We pay to go to the movies, we watch Netflix, people go to plays, people go to be entertained by stories. And telling an entertaining story is one skill, But I think to your audience, people who are building businesses and people who are trying to promote themselves and promote their business and persuade people, entertainment is sort of a good side benefit. So that's not the place where I focus mostly. I'm not writing a novel. I'm not making a movie. I'm trying to convey ideas, get ideas from my brain into your brain so that we can collaborate and make better decisions. So entertaining is one of the things they could do. But the second one is stories can convey knowledge. So I teach workshops about storytelling, and I'll talk about maybe the history of story and storytelling. Maybe I'll teach about creativity or critical thinking. And in those, I'm trying to convey knowledge that I have into your brain. And I want to convey that in a way that is easy for you to absorb. So I can send facts to you or send knowledge to you via story. The third thing is I can convey insight. And insight's slightly different from knowledge. I say that insight is knowledge distilled by experience. So I can use stories to tell you a bunch of things and let you know maybe about the how the features of my product have been able to help other people or other customers that have used it. Or I can say, I know you. We've had a long relationship, maybe. I understand your problem. And here is this piece of knowledge that is now distilled because I've used it. I've done this several times. And here's the real thing you need to know. Don't worry about all the rest. Here's the core thing. And if you follow this principle, you're going to be successful. So stories can convey insight. And then the last thing stories can do is stories can deepen connection. So stories change the way that our brains operate. You can, through stories, you release dopamine, you can release oxytocin, which is the chemical that gives us these feelings of trust. And you can use stories to communicate about yourself in a way that builds trust simply through the story. And that when you tell a story, particularly one where you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you talk about some struggles and how you overcame those struggles, the people that hear those stories, they now get that shot of oxytocin and they see you as a person who is someone to be trusted. So when I talk about those things, entertainment, knowledge, insight, or communication, or connection rather, right? Those are sort of the core things that humans are doing all the time. And stories just make it easier for us to do all of those things.
Very nice. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And what I got out of that, Ambush, is that I'm over here taking notes and hope if you're not driving that you are as well. Conveys knowledge, insight, and deeper connection, right? I think sometimes, us being veterans, we can try to be a commander in communication, force insight, but also knowing how to match that person's needs and wants in front of you. Like Dan was just saying, as far as customers, right? Knowing how to leverage a current case study that aligns with what the person just said, and dancing with storytelling in the moment, right? That's an important skill set to be able to do. Now, Dan, I know I don't mean to put you on the spot here, man, but I know you're well equipped to be able to answer this question as well. From your history of working with potential veteran entrepreneurs, which, there's a couple listeners that listen to this show. Yes, there's entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs that listen to this show that are veterans. We also have, veterans that are employers looking to hire vets, right? That are employers themselves, and also mid-level managers just looking to kind of climb up that ladder, and probably some active duty members that are getting out and just trying to figure out where the hell do I win post-military, right? So that's kind of the Rolodex. But in this context, as far as aspiring entrepreneurs wanting to become more successful entrepreneurs, I'd love to hear what are the greatest challenges that you have seen with veteran entrepreneurs learning how to become better storytellers. What are the greatest barriers?
So I think one of the big barriers is that we mistake the things we say, or we confuse the things we say and the things that actually sink into our audience. So if you think back to probably every PowerPoint presentation you've ever seen, there's way more on the slide than can ever make it into your brain. But for the person who's presenting, they're like, well, it's on the slide, like as if it absolves them from the duty of communicating with you, because I said the words, I showed them on this big slide. If you didn't get it, that's your fault. But I try to turn that around. The responsibility to communicate effectively is mine as the communicator. And if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to sell my product, or I want to attract investors, or I want to persuade people to give me a chance, then it's just in my self-interest to communicate in a way that works, not for me, but in a way that works for you. And what happens is a lot of veterans, and not just veterans, it's a common problem. They will focus a lot on the words that they want to say, but not on evaluating how many of those words actually sink into the person that they're talking to.
Yeah, no, I see
So,
that.
so when you reformat things around stories, and a lot of people will say, well, I don't have time for a story, or this is a professional conversation. This isn't story time. Like, fine. If you want to have that attitude, that's fine. But if you want to get your idea into someone else's brain, as I said, humans have been telling stories for 100,000 years. Why don't we go back and construct our story in a way that another human expects it to arrive, deliver that story, and you're going to get more impact, even though you may not say all the words that you would say if you're doing a PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of, there's what I'm hearing is like being able to reach to that person through the screen, or whatever, right? Like being able to communicate in a way that you're not just so dependent on the PowerPoint. If you're pitching a customer, partner, or a potential investor, learning how to storytell and create a context around that slide, that, to what Dan's been saying, conveys, knowledge, insight, deeper connection, right? To kind of get them in a position to where they are persuaded or influenced a little bit.
So let me add one other thing as well,
Yeah.
right? The other thing that might be helpful for your audience, especially people who are transitioning, is that all of us who have been in the military, like our resume is kind of a mess, right? If you were to list all of the assignments, all the places that you've been, and someone says, well, tell me about yourself. If I started with, well, I went to pilot training in Texas, then I went to Tucson and I learned how to fly the A-10, then I went to Germany, then I went back to Tucson, and then went back to Germany. Like by the time you get to the second assignment, the person's already like, whoa. Really, the question they're asking is, what does this mean? What does this mean? What should I be taking from all this that you're saying? So when I'm working with people who are trying to get a job, I tell them a list of things that happened is not a story. A story is, what is the thread that connects all of those assignments? What are the skills that you developed because you went from assignment to assignment? What are the capabilities? What makes you special? What did you learn by going through those different assignments, those different places where you were? And what's a story that sort of wraps all that into one? What's one example of where you had to learn that skill, you use that skill, and now it's something you do, moving forward? When you tell your resume in the form of a story, not the whole thing, but the little pieces that you want to highlight, you're going to stand out. But more importantly, it's going to sink in. The person that you're talking to is going to hear you as a person understands how to communicate, where they're coming from, and you're steps ahead of everyone else who's just sort of listing all the things that they've ever done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's what does this mean? What does this mean to me? And thinking all the way through to even what does it mean to the person that would potentially be reading your resume, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's incredible. Thank you for that. And just seeing the threads and the assignments and what does this mean, Ambitious Vet? I hope that you're letting that sink in like I am. I'm probably gonna have to sleep on that to have it sink in a little bit deeper, but some good stuff. So Dan, I want to kind of dive into the practicality of storytelling, right? That was one big thing. I think you did a breakout session at Military Infantry Conference. Feel free to dive in as deep as you want or high level as you want. I know that you have a great website that an ambitious vet can go visit and dive more deeper into the trenches with you as well on this. But would love for you to kind of dive into some high level components of great storytelling, would you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the key thing to remember when you're telling a story is that every story worth telling, every story worth hearing is a story of transformation. It's a story of change. So when you are planning to tell a story, you have to be really clear on what that moment of change was. Where did you go from you used to believe this and now you believe that? Or things used to be this way and now they're this way. And for those of us that have been in the military, there are tons of those. Right? The day that you decided to join the military, the day that you graduated from basic training, the day that you got qualified, you're fully qualified to do whatever job that you were doing. If you were in combat, your first day in combat, maybe your last day in combat, maybe the most memorable day in combat. When did you decide you're going to get out of the military? What was the first day that you woke up and you didn't put on a uniform, that you had your civilian clothes on? The first interview that you had after the military where you're getting ready to get some other job. Like each of those are key transition points. And there's tons that we've learned by going through those transition points. So you center that change right in the middle of your story, not just in the timeline of your story, but also like everything that you're telling in the beginning of the story leads up to this moment of change. And everything that comes after it is all about how the world changed. What were those challenges you had before that now weren't challenges because of this realization you had or this experience that you had? And if you do nothing except focus on that change, tell what happened before the change, describe the change that happened, and then tell how life was different after the change, you're going to be a better storyteller than, honestly, probably 85% of the people on earth.
So the climax of the story is the change.
So it's not even the climax, right? It's the very center, right? I mean, it is the, like, action rises to that point. Like, everything points to that. So, I mean, I guess it's the climax, but I don't even think of it in terms of that. Like, I don't have a story unless I have the change.
Gotcha.
Now, I'll do things when I tell the story to make sure that the people, my audience, whether it's a reader or someone who's listening, that they don't miss it. I'll say things like, and then something happened that I'll never forget. Or then something happened that changed my life. Or then I realized something that changed everything. And it just brings your audience's attention right back to that moment, because this is the whole reason they're paying attention to you. It's for what happened in that moment of change. Make sure they don't miss it, nail it, and people are going to think you're amazing.
I love that. There's a weapon for your toolbox right there, Ambitious Vet, for sure. I love that hook. I love it. So Dan, thanks for diving into that high-level framework. And Ambitious Vet, if you want to learn more about Dan, go and check out his website as well. I believe it's buildthestory.com. Go learn more about his packages and also some content that he may have available for you to learn more and dive deeper in as well. Dan, I want to kind of wrap this up with just a, last segment of the show. Sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. We're going to do it this time, which is pretty much your last save rounds, right? As I said before, we have a few ambitious vets that listen to the show. One is potentially an active duty member. Pretty much just, hey, what do I want to do post-military, right? I'm ambitious, I'm goal-oriented. What do I want to do, post-military? Then we're going to have an aspiring entrepreneur or a startup, kind of a startup, early stage startup entrepreneur listening to this. It's a veteran. And then we also have a private sector veteran that's in that world trying to navigate that and to become a better leader inside of that sector. Will there be one last golden grenade that you could supply one or all those vets that could help them become a better storyteller today?
So I think the most important thing is to realize that it's sort of that last of those four things that stories can do, and that's to deepen connection. And a lot of times we veterans are reluctant to tell our stories because to us, it's not such a big deal, or maybe it's a really tough time and it's hard to be vulnerable about those times that we went through. But if you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to share that story, it's going to have amazing impact. I just worked with a veteran that I met at the Military Influencer Conference, who's also an entrepreneur, and I worked with him to do a story, and he presented it for the first time just this week, actually. And then I got a text back from him right away about how many people were coming up to him after that conference, sharing their own experiences and saying, I went through something very similar to that. People who were making life-changing decisions because he was willing to be open and vulnerable and honest about his story. Wow. It has incredible impact, and we minimize it. So just do it. Tell your story. If you need help telling your story, come to me, check me out on LinkedIn. I'll be glad to help you out.
Yeah, I love that, Dan. And Ambitious Vet, I can't tell you enough. Just spending 5 minutes with him, as you can tell, he's a wealth of knowledge and has a huge background. Even when he was a fighter pilot, learning how to storytell, right? You got to communicate precisely and impactful. People's lives are at stake, right? As we know when we're serving. But, definitely an incredible leader in storytelling. And definitely, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, if you're aspiring to raise money, if you're aspiring to influence and persuade your customers, potential partnerships, storytelling is where it starts. Make sure you go and you reach out to Dan at buildthestory.com. Dan, I just want to say thank you for joining the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, Chris.
The Ambitious Vet is available on all popular podcast platforms. Go to vettrainingcoaching.com to subscribe, rate, and share with fellow vets.
Ambitious Vet, if you're ready to dive into the trenches with other growth-minded veterans like yourself looking to improve in everyday trenches of life and get a more personalized experience behind this podcast, go and check out ambitiousvetnetwork.com and apply for our exclusive community learning platform, where from there, you're going to be able to take a customized onboarding approach where you're going to take a self-assessment to figure out what areas of life that you want to improve on. And then from there, get accepted if you have military experience. If not, then we're going to boot you out. Sorry. But if you do have military experience, you're going to get approved. And then you're going to be able to be matchmaked and connected with other connections looking to improve in that same exact area, along with matchmaked with other content such as courses and monthly live online events where you can build deep and lasting relationships with other veterans just like yourself. Again, go check out ambitiousvetnetwork.com. Would love to see your application come in, but more than anything, would love to see see you inside the actual platform, engaging and building the deep relationships we all need to improve in the trenches of everyday life.